12 months, over 10,000 deaths recorded in Turkey's Syria earthquake. This is Global News. Thanks for tuning. On the news, separatist rebels take New Zealand pilot hostage in Papua. President says Sri Lanka may return to growth by year end. North Korea's Kim Jong-un hails army ahead of anticipated military parade. Amnesty says hundreds of Thai children facing charges over protests, and key takeaways from Biden's State of the Union address. This and more stories. Separatist fighters in Indonesia's agitated Papua region have seized a pilot from New Zealand and are holding him hostage after setting his plane ablaze. The West Papua National Liberation Army, TPNBP, said on Tuesday in a statement. The pilot, identified by local police as Philip Mertens, was captured after landing a commercial charter flight at Paro Airport, the remote highlands of the Ngwa Regency, on Tuesday. 5 passengers, including a baby, were on the Susi Air flight, but it remains unclear what has become of them. Papua Police Chief Inspector Matthews Fikiri said, according to reports on Tuesday. A search team made up of police and military personnel has been sent to the area. In the statement, Ignanus also ordered that all incoming flights to Paro Airport be stopped and said the pilot will not be set free until the Indonesian government acknowledged Papuan independence. The Indonesian government terms the TPNBP as a terrorist group. New Zealand government officials said, according to reports, they were aware of the situation involving a New Zealand pilot in Papua and that the New Zealand embassy in Jakarta was providing consular support to the family. Separatist fighters in Indonesia's easternmost region of Papua have been demanding independence since the region was brought under Indonesian control following a controversial 1969 vote overseen by the United Nations. Hostility in the impoverished but resource-rich region where the Indonesian military maintains a heavy presence, however, has intensified in recent years. On business and economy, Sri Lanka's economy is likely to grow again from the end of this year, and the government wants the country to exit bankruptcy by 2026, President Ranil Wickremesinghe has told the parliament. The Indian Ocean island of 22 million people has been grappling with its worst economic crisis since its independence from Britain in 1948, which has forced it to default on loans and seek a $2.9 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund, IMF. On Wednesday, Wickremesinghe said the government could turn around the economy of Sri Lankans, tolerated high direct taxes for another 6 months. He said last month that the economy for the full year could contract by 3.5% or 4% after shrinking 11% last year. Recent rise in income taxes have rocked salary earners hard, with trade unions and private sector professionals staging protests in Colombo, the country's biggest city. The president said the target was to reduce inflation to single digits by the end of the year. Sri Lanka's main inflation rate, the Colombo Consumer Price Index, reduced to 54.2% in January from 57.2% in December. Now, to mark the 75th anniversary of the establishment of his army, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has lauded the irresistible might of his nuclear armed forces as he paid a visit to military officials accompanied by his daughter during the event. The visit and address to military officials come amid signs that North Korea is planning to stage a huge parade of its armed forces in the capital, Pyongyang, where it is anticipated that the country's rising nuclear and conventional weapons programs will be showcased. On Wednesday, reports said Kim visited the lodging quarters of his general officers with his daughter, Kim Jong-ae. He later addressed soldiers at a banquet, praising them for maintaining the strongest army in the world despite external difficulties. The visit comes a day after Kim headed over a meeting with his top military officials and called for an expansion of combat drills targeted at sharpening war readiness. Kim and his daughter, alleged to be 9 or 10 years old, were dressed similar in black suits and white dress shirts and held hands as they walked down a red carpet alongside Kim's wife, Ri Sol-ju. In her 4th documented public appearance, Kim's daughter stood closely with her father as he shook the hands of senior officials and sat next to him at a table surrounded by military officers. On child rights, these are among the stories discovered in a new report from Amnesty International, which documents supposed human rights violations linked with children. A 14-year-old charged with insulting the king, a 13-year-old physically dragged out of a restaurant by police officers, a 17-year-old shot with rubber bullets and beaten. Sainam, who had earlier been shot with rubber-coated bullets, was a regular fixture at the pro-democracy protests, but the then 17-year-old had planned to skip the demonstration on the day of his arrest in 2021 and participated in Thailand's long-running protest and was released on Wednesday. In closely 300 cases, defendants who were children at the time of their alleged infractions are facing criminal charges, numerous of which are linked to the 2020-2021 protest movement. Amnesty says the proceedings violate their freedom of expression, are tearing families apart and putting futures in jeopardy. The protest, which asked for greater democratization, also broke a nationwide taboo by openly calling for reforms to the monarchy, including abolishing Article 112, which makes defaming, insulting, or threatening members of the royal family a crime. In November 2021, the Constitutional Court ruled that even calls for reform qualified as an attempt to overthrow the monarchy. Of the children facing criminal charges, 17 were charged with lèse majesty under Article 112, which carries a prison sentence of between 3 and 15 years, Amnesty says. Joe Biden, United States President, has delivered the annual State of the Union address, the second of his presidency, drafting his policy goals and talking up achievements as he considers running for a second term in office. But the speech on Tuesday was his first to deliver to a divided Congress, which interrupted the president during the sometimes aggressive speech. Facing a Democrat-led Senate and House of Representatives now under Republican control, the 80-year-old president touted his economic track record and victories in infrastructure spending, clean energy, and prescription drug pricing. With State of the Union speeches attracting tens of millions of viewers each year, this year's address is expected to be the biggest platform Biden has before, potentially hitting the campaign trail ahead of the 2024 presidential election. Here are some biggest takeaways from this year's speech, and I quote: the U.S. president called on Republicans to work with him, decrying fighting for the sake of fighting. But Biden also took the opportunity to press Republicans, calling for cooperation as discussions over adding the debt ceiling continue to stall. Under Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy, the House majority appears unlikely to advance many of the priorities put forward in Biden's speech, including police reform and a billionaire maximum tax. Ahead of the 2022 midterm elections, the U.S. economy, hampered by inflation, was greatly seen as an Achilles heel for Democrats. But Biden's Democratic Party succeeded in muting a widely anticipated Republican red wave. The U.S. president on Tuesday made his economic record one of the central points, if not the focal message of his speech, hailing low unemployment rates, infrastructure investments, and what he described as a comeback of American manufacturing. Biden said after years of bleeding factory jobs overseas, the U.S. is on track to reverse trends in manufacturing. He also hailed a 2021 bipartisan law that secured $1.2 trillion to revitalize the country's infrastructure. On more stories, New Zealand recovers $300 million of cocaine floating at sea. Police in New Zealand had recovered 3.2 tons of cocaine worth over $300 million found floating in the Pacific Ocean and believed to be bound for Australia. Authorities said the whole of 81 bales, which was drifting hundreds of kilometers northwest of New Zealand, was recovered in a joint operation with the New Zealand Customs Service and Defence Force acting on intelligence from the Five Eyes Alliance, which also includes Australia, the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Officials believe the drugs were dropped at a floating transit point in the Pacific Ocean where they will have been picked up and taken to Australia. Reports also show the massive hull was bound by netting and covered in yellow floats. Some of the bales had a Batman symbol on them, with the packages of cocaine inside labeled with what appeared to be a print of a four-leaf clover. Costa described the bust as a huge result for police in both New Zealand and Australia. Officials said it was too early to say where the drugs came from. No arrests have been made yet. Philippines Marcos visits Japan seeking closer security relations. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is scheduled to arrive in Japan for a visit likely to make way for closer security ties between the two countries. On Wednesday, Marcos' first visit comes after he signed an agreement last week granting the United States greater access to its military bases. It also follows a trip to Beijing last month where the Philippine president told his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping that the Philippines will trail an independent foreign policy. The Philippines Assistant Secretary for Asian and Pacific Affairs, Neil Imperial, said, according to a report last week, that Marcos wanted to facilitate closer defense, security, political, economic, and people-to-people ties while in Japan. That sentiment is shared in Tokyo, which has been strengthening security ties with nations that views China with concern. In a pre-departure speech on Wednesday, Marcos said he will cultivate complementary interests which converge with those of Japan. Marcos and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida are anticipated to sign an agreement on disaster relief that will facilitate joint exercises in humanitarian assistance provision, according to reports. That agreement is seen as the possible first step towards establishing a broader legal framework that will permit Japanese forces to deploy to the Philippines more easily under a reciprocal access agreement, which sets out the legal status for visiting forces. Japan and Australia signed a visiting forces agreement a year ago, consenting them to deploy forces on each other's soil, with Tokyo concluding a comparable accord with the United Kingdom last month. Those deals provide a framework for how Marcos and Kishida could also forge deeper military ties to counter their mutual adversary, say experts. In Africa, Tunisia sends humanitarian aid to quake-hit Turkey and Syria. Tunisia has joined a long list of countries that are sending assistance to quake-hit Turkey and Syria. President Kais Saied had ordered humanitarian aid for countries, including over 15 tons of blankets and food, after they were hit on Monday by a 7.8 magnitude earthquake which killed and injured numerous people. Dozens of nations, including the United States, China, and the Gulf states, have promised to support, and such teams as well as relief supplies have started arriving by air. A winter storm has compounded the misery by making many roads, some of them destroyed by the quake, almost impassable, resulting in traffic jams that stretch for kilometers in some regions. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkish president, has declared a 3-month state of emergency in 10 southeastern provinces. The World Health Organization has warned that up to 23 million people could be affected by the massive earthquake and urged nations to rush help to the disaster zone. And lastly, on global news, Malawi High Court reinstates anti-corruption boss Martha Chisuma. Malawi's High Court has hauled up a recent government suspension of the head of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, ACB, Martha Chizuma, a move that could see her return to work sooner than anticipated. Ms. Chizuma's suspension was last week declared by the Secretary to the President and the Cabinet, Colin Zamba. She was last week suspended following an audio leak of her allegedly pointing fingers to top government officials and judicial officers for deterring fight against corruption. She was later sued by an official, which later ended into her suspension. The suspension did not sit well with the members of the opposition and the lawyers in the country, who later condemned the incidents. The lawyers cited the country's law referring to the president as the only person allowed by law to suspend her. Stay with me for more stories on Zoom on Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back. Welcome back. It's Zoom on Nigeria. We begin with Emefiele says Central Bank of Nigeria will not be used to frustrate 2023 polls. The Naira redesign won't affect the 2023 general election, says the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, as it will provide the required cash and other help required for the smooth conduct of the poll. The CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele said this when he received Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, the chairman, Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC), and his management team in Abuja on Tuesday. Emefiele said that the CBN had always been supportive of INEC in whatever way possible to make sure that it delivered on its mandate of ensuring hitch-free elections. He added that the Central Bank of Nigeria will provide all needed support to INEC to ensure credible general election. Earlier, Yakubu said the visit was to seek the CBN's support toward a hitch-free 2023 general election, especially with the recent Naira redesign policy which placed restrictions on cash withdrawal, saying that election is a great and complex project that needs the engagement of critical services. Now, President Buhari cancels meeting with governors as TUC issues ultimatum. As Nigerians wait for the much-needed reprieve to the present cash squeeze ahead of the Friday's deadline of the cash swap policy, a meeting between President Muhammadu Buhari and the Nigerian Governors Forum (NGF) apparently scheduled to deliberate a delicate situation failed to hold yesterday. It was collected that the president cancelled it in view of the court order restraining government from extending the February 10th deadline for the swapping of all notes for the redesigned ones. Reports disclosed that the president was careful about the likely perception of disregard for lawful orders should the policy be further discussed at this time. Late Monday, it was disclosed that President Buhari will meet with governors to discuss, among other things, the nationwide crisis trailing CBN's new Naira policy. The council meeting comes only 4 days after the president met with governors elected on the platform of the All Progressives Congress (APC), after which he appealed to Nigerians to give him 7 days to resolve the crisis. On Monday, APC governors Nasir El-Rufai Kaduna, Yahaya Bello of Kogi, and Bello Matawale Zamfara dragged the federal government to the Supreme Court. The governors prayed the court to declare that the demonetization policy of the federation currently executed by the CBN under President Buhari's approval contravenes the extant provisions of the 1999 Constitution as amended CBN Act 2007 and other relevant laws on the matter. As panic sweeps through the banking industry over cash scarcity, the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, CIBN, the umbrella professional body for bankers, has said relevant stakeholders are working assiduously to correct the situation. And finally, IGP redeploys DIGs, AIGs, other senior police officers. Usman Alkali Baba, the Inspector General of Police IGP, has given his approval for some senior police officers to be posted and redeployed within the force. IGP Baba reportedly ordered the transfer of commissioners of police CPs, Assistant Inspectors General of Police AIGs, and Deputy Inspector General of Police DIGs to departments, commands, and formations. His manpower development plan of using round pegs in round holes informs the decision. On Tuesday, according to a statement released by the Force Public Relations Officer CSP Ulumuyiwa Adejobi, DIG Damalam Mohammed FDC has been transferred to the Department of Finance and Administration, and the following Assistant Inspector General of Police have been posted to take over the responsibilities of the Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of the following departments of the force as indicated against their names to DIG Department of Training and an Assistant Inspector General of Police. AIG Habusani Amadou has been posted as Force Secretary, while AIG Shwayu Lafia Abdul-Yari assumes office as the AIG in charge of the First Intelligence Bureau Force Headquarters in Abuja. The IGP charged the newly posted officers to hit the ground running to make sure the mission, vision, and policy statements of his administration are efficiently complied with in the areas of crime fighting, public operation, and safety. To refresh our memory, separatist rebels take a New Zealand pilot hostage in Papua. President says Sri Lanka may return to growth by year-end. North Korea's Kim Jong-un hails army ahead of anticipated military parade. Amnesty says hundreds of Thai children facing charges over protests, and key takeaways from Biden's State of the Union address. Remember, asking for help is a sign of strength. Don't let your fear of being judged stop you from asking for help when you need it. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Sureki. Have a great day.